we go. All right, take it away, Ivan.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. We really appreciate you coming all the way over to Zoom for this presentation on E-rate and how libraries can benefit from the E-rate program. My name is Ivan Rushfield. I am the lead consultant in the E-rate program here at SOLIX Inc. We are a New Jersey-based E-rate consulting firm, although SOLIX also does a whole lot of other things. This is just my little corner. So today we are going to give you a presentation on a number of the different things that are involved in E-rate. We are not going to go too far into the weeds. We understand that some of you have limited experience. Some of you have very little experience when it comes to E-rate, and that's fine. There is some strange E-rate lingo you will see, and I will do my best to explain all of those things as they come, so at no point you get too lost. We will have some time at the end for questions, and we are happy to answer everything that we are able to. And so without further ado, we will get into the presentation itself. As soon as I'm able to get some screen sharing, because right now I can't do it.
Well, you should be able to. Let me click some buttons. How about now?
There we go.
All right.
Start this up. Okay, I hope everyone's seeing it. So this is our little presentation. Excellent. This is our little presentation presented by us and the State Library of Kansas. Not to be confused with Kansas State Library, which is a conversation we just had the other day. So away we go. So let's talk about what E-rate is. We have an agenda, and these are the questions we would like to answer. What the E-rate program is, what determines the discount you get from the E-rate program, what makes a library eligible under E-rate, if there are any specific rules to follow, what services are eligible, how to select a vendor, how to actually apply for E-rate grants, and what roles do people play in this whole E-rate process. So first of all, what's E-rate? E-rate is a federal program that provides discounts on services to make sure that schools and libraries across the country, all 50 states, all U.S. territories, they all have access to high-speed internet. That is something that I think, as you know, as people who are working with libraries, as representatives of libraries, the internet has become crucial to library services. Those big, huge shelves of reference books you might have had, you used to have, maybe you still have some of them, but a lot of them have all moved online, whether it's in the form of journals or various other studies. The internet is incredibly crucial to your mission. And so USAC and the E-rate program are here to help that. E-rate is administered by a company called USAC, or the Universal Service Administrative Company. They are not the government. They work for the government. The whole program is run by the FCC, and USAC administers it for them. And they take care of the day-to-day operations of the program. And in fact, they even subcontract to another company, which is called Maximus, which is not that important, but it's interesting to know. And they're the ones who you will mostly communicate with when you're involved in the E-rate program. And they provide up to $3.9 billion in funds every year for internet, network equipment to make the internet run better in your library, as well as maintenance on all of that equipment. So what is E-rate? What is it going to do for you? Well, what E-rate does is it allows your library to get some pretty serious discounts on your monthly internet bill, as well as that equipment that makes the internet run better. You can get anywhere from 20% to up to 90% off your internet bill for category 2, which I will get to in a minute, which is equipment and things like that. The highest you can get is 85%. Now, how do you know what kind of discount you get? Well, that rate is determined by the student population in your area that qualifies for the National School Lunch Program. The higher the percentage of kids that qualify for that program, the higher your discount is. Again, up to 90%. Really, if any more than 75% of the kids qualify, then it's a 90% district, and so a 90% library. There are other ways to determine this information. They might use things like Medicaid or SNAP or various other systems of measuring child welfare, but primarily it's through the National School Lunch Program, or NSLP. Now, as a library, you cannot have any impact on your discount. You do not have students, you have patrons, and your discount is determined by the school district in which you are located. So no one's ever going to ask you for discount information. That all just goes to the school district where you happen to be. And this here is the discount matrix. This shows you the number of, basically how to determine what discount you get based on the percentage of kids that qualify for free and reduced lunch in your local school district. Now, as you can see, the libraries that are considered rural libraries get a higher discount until they get to the 80% to 90% level. Again, urban and rural setting has nothing to do with anything you do. It's just based on where you are. You cannot impact it. USAC determines whether you are rural or urban. It has to do with the population and the size of your town, as well as the urban cluster where you are. Again, it's nothing you're really involved in, but as we can see here, if you are considered an urban library, you will get a somewhat smaller discount until you get up to those higher levels, those 80 and 90% levels. So what makes a library eligible for E-rate? I know you're thinking, well, I'm in the library, I look around, books everywhere. Doesn't this qualify? Probably, but that's not really what does it. To be an eligible library under E-rate, you have to meet the statutory definition of a library or a library consortium as determined by the Library Services and Technology Act. The most important thing here is that you are recognized as a library by the state. And this really comes down to the State Library of Kansas. And this is where they become really important, because they can verify that you are a legitimate library, an eligible library. And every public library is perfectly eligible. There are certain qualifications that would make libraries ineligible, but if we're talking here, you almost certainly are. A really important thing here is that you cannot be part of a school. You cannot be a school library that basically gets this money from the school, like the library inside an elementary school. That does not count unless your budget is totally separate from the schools, which is pretty rare. So what libraries are eligible under E-rate? As I said, public libraries and library systems. If you are a county library or a township library, you are set. You are eligible, as you are almost certainly recognized by the state. Now, public elementary school and secondary school libraries are eligible if their budget is separate from the school or school district that they are in. So, as a matter of practice, it's actually very rare that we see secondary school or public school libraries applying for E-rate on their own. Same with academic and research libraries. They're okay if they're publicly available. If they are part of a university or part of a college, they are not eligible for E-rate. And even on the school side, colleges and universities cannot request E-rate grants. It's all for K through 12. In some states, pre-K through 12. Tribal libraries are eligible as long as they meet these three main criteria, which is that they have regularly scheduled hours, staff, and material available for library users. Now, private libraries, again, if they are considered a library by the state, they're eligible. But as a matter of practice, we see very, very few private libraries. The overwhelming majority are public libraries and public library systems, with the occasional tribal library. So this is really important and something that every library has to be involved in if they are going to get E-rate funds. That is the Children's Internet Protection Act, or SIPA. SIPA basically makes sure that young people are not able to access dangerous or illicit items on your computers. We do not want, per the Children's Internet Protection Act, we do not want children looking at things that are perhaps too adult or too lewd, anything like that. So you need to have an internet safety policy. You need to have some kind of technology protection measure in place. And you need to have a public notice or hearing announcing that you do have this technology protection measure, such as content filtering, things like that. And you must be SIPA compliant to obtain E-rate funding. If you do not want to filter your internet access for your patrons, that is your right to do so. However, you will not be eligible to accept E-rate then under those circumstances. I was talking to my local library. I live in a very small town, about a mile square, and it's a fairly small library. And I was talking to them about E-rate, and they were very interested. And I said, "Well, do you filter your computers?" And she said, "Oh no, I can see them all right there. They had 6 computers." She said, "Oh, I can see them." And so, unfortunately, we weren't able to do anything for them because they were not interested in filtering their content. For adult patrons, you can lift that filtering. Sometimes an adult patron might say, "Hey, I'm really looking at these things. I don't want them to get blocked. So I'm doing some research. Can you please help me out here?" And you are able to lift that. So if you are not SIPA compliant currently, there is sort of there are stages. So in the first year, when you apply for E-rate, if you've not applied for E-rate before and you are not yet SIPA compliant, then that first year you should be undertaking actions to become compliant. The second year, you should be good. You should be compliant. You should have your items in place. If not, you will need a waiver. If for some reason you were, some kind of hardship happened and you weren't able to complete everything, then you can apply for a waiver that second year. But by year 3, you really need to be compliant with SIPA. So you do need to have a safety policy, and you do need to have some kind of content filtering or something to prevent kids from accessing parts of the internet that they should not be accessing. Now, you do need to have documentation of this SIPA compliance, and you want to hold on to this for about 10 years. I think it's a general matter of practice. Since you're having a public notice, I think it's better to just keep it forever, have those documents. But 10 years is the limit with E-rate documents. So what you'll want to have is a copy of your internet safety policy, some documentation showing that there was public notice, whether it's an ad in the newspaper or something on your website, or perhaps board minutes showing the adopted policy, as well as a description of the filter, documentation showing that you used it and purchased it. This could be a bill. This could be just your order of the filtering, the yearly fee you pay them for the filtering, that sort of thing. But you do need to have some kind of documentation of it because USAC might ask, because sometimes there are complaints that people lodge against libraries and schools saying, "Hey, my kid is able to access X, Y, and Z," and they can have their funding pulled because they're not compliant. Compliance is a big thing in E-rate overall. That's the most important thing, to be compliant with what they want. So here's where we get into some of the E-rate lingo I was telling you about. So I'm going to use terms like these: Category 1 and Category 2. So just so you know what I'm talking about when I say these things. Category 1 or Cat 1, that's internet access. That is the 95% of what I'm talking about when I say Category 1 is internet access. So this is just the fiber optics or the Ethernet or the cabling that goes into your school from the internet service provider and connects you to the internet. Now, for libraries, mobile broadband is eligible. We're talking things like hotspots. However, this is only if it's the most cost-effective solution. So schools don't really have much of a reason to use this. However, libraries do, because you have bookmobiles. You do have these mobile internet libraries. So if you want to have internet for your bookmobile and you think that a hotspot service is the most cost-effective way of doing it, you can get approval for that. But otherwise, hotspots are ineligible unless it's the only way really of providing internet there. Now, the other category is Category 2. So if Category 1 is service, Category 2 is stuff, physical things, switches, routers, access points, cabling, things to make the internet run throughout the whole library or through all of your libraries in case you're a library system, as well as maintenance on that equipment. And the other thing that they will provide is discounts for managed internal broadband connections, or should be managed internal broadband services, or MIBs, otherwise MIBC, but no, it's MIBs, managed internal broadband services. Basically, if you have a managed service, you can get some discounts on that as well. So here is a look at what all the services are. Like I said, data transmission, internet access, connecting the library to the internet at large. Hardly anyone uses DSL anymore, so we're talking things like Ethernet and fiber optics. If you're in a very remote area, you might use satellite, although those of us that have experienced satellite know it's not your first option. And that's category one. And then everything else on the right side is category two: internal connections, routers, switches, hubs, all that sort of thing. Managed internal broadband service, as well as maintenance on all of those items. So what's not eligible? Computers. You cannot get laptops, you cannot get desktops. Any end user equipment is no good. So tablets, security cameras, we get asked about security cameras a lot. Hotspots for circulation, if you want to loan them out to patrons to bring home, that is not covered by E-rate. They used to cover telephone service, but they don't do that anymore. They phased that out a few years ago. So same with fax service. Redundant services, if you have two internet services and one of them is there in case the other one breaks, that's not eligible. We're not going to pay for that second internet service. If you have two internet providers or two services, two circuits working in concert, working together at all times, that is eligible. I have one school client who has, no joke, 5 different internet service providers across his 2 buildings. And it seems like a nightmare, but he has the system just the way he likes it. And we actually, that was approved recently. So, because nothing was redundant, everything worked on its own. Internet filtering, even though you need it, is not eligible. And that is something we complain about to USAC every single year. And they ignore us every single year that you need to have things like antivirus and internet filtering, and they do not cover it. It's just, you have to pay for it out of pocket. And the last one is unbundled warranties with equipment. If you have equipment where the warranty doesn't have its own line item, it's just sort of built into it, they'll allow that. But if it has its own cost, you cannot get E-rate funding for it. A bit more on category 2 services, because this is a bit different. With category 1, it costs what it costs. You have to choose the most cost-effective vendor, but there's not a limit per se. With category 2, there is. You have a budget that lasts 5 years on 5-year cycles. And every budget right now, they all started in the 2021 funding year. And so they will reset in July 2026 when we start that year, because then that 5 years, and they will adjust the price for inflation. Right now, the budget is determined by the size of your library. And if you have multiple libraries in your system, it's the size of all the libraries together, all their square footage. And it's $4.50 per square foot. That will go up in 2026 to, well, just whatever inflation is. With inflation being what it is, I assume that's $9,000 per square foot, but who knows what the situation would that would be in a few years. But the minimum you'll get per building is $25,000. It used to be that each building had its own budget, but now they just combine all of the libraries in your system under one budget. You can put the money to whatever uses you need to across all of your libraries. But the least you'll get is $25,000 per library. Now we are going to year 4, because it's going to be the 2024 funding year, going into year 4 of that 5-year cycle. So if you do have some interest in refreshing your hotspot, not hotspot, the firewalls, access points, routers, cabling, any of those things, this year and next year are the best times to look at it, because that money goes away. The money that's in your pot right now will disappear when we go into the 2026 funding year. So we're talking about these funding years and all these things you have to apply for. When do you do all this? So the E-rate year itself, when we talk about funding year, it's 12 months. It is July 1st to June 30th of the following year. So right now, we are paying off things. Clients are getting reimbursed for funding year 2023, which goes from July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2024. We are about to start applying for things in the 2024 funding year, which will be July 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2025. We apply for services before that, but that's when the funding actually starts. Now, the competitive bidding process, actually requesting things, that's been open since July 1st. That always opens July 1st of that year. And you have to put out those requests for bids before you can do anything. Now, even though we can request bids for services, we cannot actually apply for anything just yet because the filing window for filing the actual application doesn't open until mid-January, and it closes sometime in March. So we have around 2 months to actually file applications, the actual request for services, once we've chosen a vendor and all of that. Also, something that's very important is that you cannot start getting reimbursement until July 1st of that year. So if we submit an application for you in January 15th, and let's say that application is approved on April 12th of 2024, you can't start getting discounts on that now. You can't start getting discounts on that service until July 1st, because that's when that service is about to start. Now, with equipment, sometimes you need equipment before July, and so the earliest you can get equipment is April. You can actually get equipment as early as April 1st, but you will not get any reimbursement until July. I know that can be a little confusing, but the most important thing is you cannot get any funding for that request until July 1st. So let's talk about the process. Now, if you can find lots of things like instructions and information at this top link, which is usac.org/e-rate, E-rate. But to actually do work to apply or to get into their system, there is a website we use called EPIC, the E-rate Productivity Portal, which is portal.usac.org/suite. If you are not able to copy that link now, you'll have opportunities to see it again. You can always go back to it. I'm happy to say it 100 times when we get to the questions later. So no worries there. Now, if you've never used E-rate and you don't know what EPIC is, you have no clue, you've never heard of it, to get the credentials to log into this website, you will have to call USAC customer service. And here's the number to do that, which is 1-888-203-8100. They will set you up. If your library is not in the system for whatever reason, they will add the entity into the system. But if you have never used it, you have no idea how to log in, you go to that site and it's just totally, Greek to you, then call that number and they will get you all set up. Now, the big important thing with E-rate is that it is a process. It is not a one and done step. So what you need to remember is that there are lots of requirements and lots of forms, which is why a lot of people hire consultants. So here are some form numbers that I might spat out, and so now you'll know what they are. There's the FCC Form 470, which is basically the wish list. It's competitive bidding. It's to get bids to come in. Then there's the FCC Form 471, and that is the actual application itself. Once you've selected a vendor, you are now saying, okay, this is who we're going with, this is the price, and you submit that application to USAC for their consideration. And then there are some forms that we're not really going to get into during the course of this presentation, which are the BEAR form, which stands for Billed Entity Applicant Reimbursement, which is an invoicing form where you pay up front and then you send the bills, you submit a reimbursement request to USAC directly, or the SPI, which is Service Provider Invoice form, the Form 474. And what that is you contact the vendor and you tell the vendor, hey, you go get the money from USAC. You just pass the savings on to me. You give me a credit and you worry about going to USAC and getting the money. Some vendors are willing to do it. Some vendors are less willing to do it. But we're not going to get too much into invoicing. That's a bit outside the purview of this presentation. So when I was talking about EPIC, here is just one of the pages. Here's the Kansas State Library page. You see here we have physical address. It has an entity number. There's currently not an FCC registration number, which for the Kansas State Library is crucial because they do not apply for their own E-rate services. But you also see there's a place for contracts. If you want to file new forms, you can go to the FCC Forms tab at the top, or to Related Actions. Related Actions has all the different things that you are able to do with your entity, whether it's updating information or it is simply filing a form. I cannot show you my pages because my page is a consulting page. It would look like what you have So this to me seems the best option to show you what, when you see the entity page for your entity or any others, it will look something like this. And here is the process fully illustrated, live and living color. Now, for the purposes of this presentation, we are really only going to be covering the first two arrows, that plan and bid. Things like post-commitment and service start dates and invoicing, that's further down the line. Right now, we just want to get you started. So what we're going to be covering is competitive bidding, where you are requesting bids with that Form 470 and evaluating those bids and selecting a provider, and then actually applying for discounts. So you are getting that application out there, it's being reviewed, and you are getting something called a Funding Commitment Decision Letter, or FCDL. Funding Commitment Decision Letter. You can see why we shortened it to FCDL, which basically tells you, yes, you will get this money. Here's how much you're going to get. All right, for the purposes of this presentation, we're only worrying about those first two arrows. So let's talk about this Form 470, this wish list. This is what you're going to use to solicit bids. Now, there are some really important things here, because if you mess up on this, you get something called a competitive bidding violation, which sounds pretty bad, and it is. Competitive bidding violations are really tough to appeal, because you're you're making a mistake, you're doing something you shouldn't do right away. It's not that hard to avoid, but people sometimes get lazy or they get forgetful and making miss of those things. So you have to wait 28 days before you choose a vendor. If I post that request for bids, that Form 470, on February 1st, I have to wait for the rest of the month. I can't look at it again until March on that 28th day. If I choose a vendor earlier, if I say, okay, you know what, it's the middle of February, if I like this guy, I'm going to sign a contract with him right now, you can't do that. You have to wait 28 days before you sign a contract, select a vendor, any of those things. You have to give time for those bids to come in. And what you do on the Form 470 is you list every service or item you think you might want. You say, I want an internet circuit between 500 megs and 1 gig of service. Or I want 3 routers that are Cisco or equivalent. I want 5 access points that are Ubiquity or equivalent, something like that. Everything you think you want, put it on. It's a wish list. You say, this is what I want you to give me bids for and give me prices for. Now, I keep saying this word equivalent because equivalent items have to be considered. And this is more of a networking thing. This is a category 2 issue. Internet is just it. But if you are looking to redo your networking setup and you realize that you need a whole bunch of new access points for every room in the library, well, let's say the current brand of your access points is Ubiquity. You cannot say, I will only take Ubiquity access points. You cannot say, I will only take this make and model. You can't do it. You have to say, I want this make and model or equivalent. You have to say or equivalent. You have to be willing to accept those things, because if not, it's going to get denied. You cannot insist on only one make or model of product. Now, it's very possible that those makes and models are really the only things you can use. Maybe your whole setup is Ubiquity, and if you go to something that's not Ubiquity, it's not going to work. You can mention on the Form 470 that your current setup is Ubiquity, and so vendors will realize that, okay, they need to provide Ubiquity items, and if they can't, maybe they just won't bother. But you have to be willing to accept equivalence. And these bids, they have to go through a competitive bidding process. You have to evaluate all the bids against each other to find the most cost-effective. That does not mean choosing the cheapest. It means choosing the most cost-effective. We'll get to what that means shortly. So here is just a clip of what a Form 470 request might look like. You see here, we have a service type, our function. In this case, it's just internet. I can show you a category 2 one, but they're much longer, and I couldn't even fit it on the slide. The category 2 request lists all of the different items you want. It allows you to choose a vendor or equivalent. It's where you can list Cisco or Ubiquity or Sonic Wall for firewalls, anything like that. You list the number of entities, the quantity of things you want, how many circuits, you're going to need installation, And if you want to list an RFP or request for proposal, you can attach one into a Form 470. Form 470s also allow you to write narratives explaining what you want and anything that a bidder might need to know. So in this example here about a board in the library, they're very clearly just seeking bids for internet access. They want all fees and surcharges and taxes included, because a lot of those taxes and surcharges you can request reimbursement for on the application. If you don't know they're there, you can't request reimbursement for them, obviously. We can also say that we want all items to be sent to this email address. We want all the responses to have the name of the library and the Form 470 number, all of those things. And you can say, if we don't get those, we're not going to consider it. You are able to set a good number of terms on what you will or not accept. So when we get to the actual competitive bidding, certain things you need to know here. All vendors have to have equal access to information and opportunities. If you put out a bid for some new equipment and you think, well, my cousin Bob's a good guy. He's got his own technology company. Well, maybe I'll just tell Bob, hey, don't make it keep it under this price and we'll pick you. You can't do that. That is a great way to get banned, to get denied, pay for all that stuff out of pocket or you just won't get it. If you are giving information to one vendor, you have to make sure that every vendor has access to that information. You can't just keep it to the ones you like. As I mentioned previously, you have to be 28 days before you can select someone. A major point here, and this is something I cannot stress enough, a main tenet of E-rate, the price must be the primary factor. Not more than 50%, not the be all end all. It just has to be the most heavily weighted. Has to be a higher score possibility than any other category. And because that is the case, we really strongly recommend that you fill out some kind of vendor selection matrix. So here's an example of vendor selection. These are all fake companies. This is based on a version of vendor evaluation we tend to use here at SOLIX. So we have our three bidders: ComCom, Bob's Technology Company, our good old cousin Bob, and Stroman Electronics. So here's what they're charging: $35K for ComCom, $40 for Bob's, and $27 for Stroman. Now, because Stroman has the lowest price under our price category, they get the highest point total. They get those 30 points higher than anyone. But we need to take other things into account. What's their experience with the library? Is their staff well put together? Are they responsive to your needs? Do they have the technical know-how to do what needs to get done? So we can see here, Stroman, they have the best price, but their technical merit is kind of toward the bottom. But we put all these things together, we see that it wins with 86 points. Their price was just too good. It is not quite, it's a little less than, rather a little more than half the price of the highest vendor. 40K versus 27K for the same stuff is, 27K is a great bargain. And Stroman probably had to keep their prices somewhat low in order to compete with companies like ComCom and Bob's. But you can see their technical merit's a bit low. Their response time is not great. So depending on how much those things or how important the things are to you, you are able to change any category you want. You can change any points you want as long as price is the most heavily weighted. It can be 26 and everything else is 25. That's fine too. Just nothing can be more heavily weighted than price. And we strongly recommend you fill out something like this so that if you ask to see it, you have it ready to go and provide it showing that you were on the up and up the whole time. You don't want to say, well, my cousin works there, I'm just going to choose my cousin. You want to have some kind of documented evidence showing that you evaluated these things properly. So once we've finished the competitive bidding portion, we move on to the Form 471, the actual application. We award the contract for services. This can take the place of an actual signed contract. This could take the place of a letter of intent, where you write a letter to the vendor saying that we have chosen you to provide this service on this date in response to this Form 470 request. And then that dated letter can be considered a legally binding statement and can be used to establish a contract award date. So then we have to actually file the Form 471 to request that funding. And we create something called an FRN, or a funding request number. Funding request number lists what the product is, the vendor information, also means a SPIN, which stands for Service Provider Identification Number. Every vendor in E-Rate has a SPIN. If the vendor does not have a SPIN, they cannot participate in E-Rate. They have to sign up and go, which they can do for free. Some vendors do not want to bother, but you cannot get E-Rate discounts if your vendor does not have a SPIN. On the FRN, we also list the costs, as well as the quantity of items or circuits, or sometimes just the number of months you're getting that service, as well as the contract status and the dates, the contract award date, the contract end date, plus the make and model of whatever equipment you are requesting. That's really important because USAC needs to determine that what you are requesting is eligible. All access points are eligible, but switches and routers sometimes have things that USAC is not going to cover, and they will ask for some kind of cost allocation. Perhaps the switch or your firewall has built-in filtering or built-in antivirus. They're going to say, okay, that portion has to go. And they do more or less have a list of everything that almost every piece of equipment that exists, they know about, and they have an eligibility rating for it. If they don't, they'll find out and they'll let you know. So this is what a Form 471 looks like, or at least a funding request looks like. The Form 471 itself has additional pages, but right now we're concerned about the funding request number itself. So we have our request, we have a nickname saying what it is. In this case, it's Internet to an Annex. We have our service provider, AT&T, their SPIN. We have our award date, how many bids we got, as well as the service start date. The service start date is almost always July 1st of that year. Occasionally, if you have one vendor taking over for another, if you have one vendor taking from July to November, and the other vendor picking up after that person and going from December to June, that is not abnormal. That happens, but almost always the service start date is going to be July 1st. Along with some information about the contract. Are there voluntary extensions? No. Is there a multiple award schedule? No. And what the expiration date is. Because as long as your contract's not going to expire at the end of that funding year, you only have to do that 470 that one time. You can just keep filing the same application year after year to keep your internet service discounted. You don't have to go and request bids again until that contract is up. And here's some details that you might see on a funding request. So what the purpose is, what it is, what it does. In this case, it's Ethernet fiber. We list the upload and download speeds, as well as information about direct connection is a part of a LAN or local area network, or a WAN, also known as a wide area network. Is it connected to any non-instructional facilities or NIFs for internet? That is fine. You are allowed to get internet to your non-instructional facilities. Libraries don't have this problem for the most part, although if you have a separate admin building, that entity would also be eligible for internet because it does serve the library. In this case, we see we have our monthly recurring cost of $1386.80 per month. Only one circuit, since the quantity is 1, and monthly service is 12. So it totals everything up. Our yearly amount is $60,641.60. And I want you to think how that compares to what your current internet bill is. But imagine getting 80% off of that. It's a huge deal. It's a great opportunity to really save a lot of money. You can put that money towards incredible things in your library, more programs, more computers, expansion. Sometimes I've had libraries save hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of years, and they're able to do just incredible things. They're able to build maker spaces, things like that. Libraries are incredible. Love them. So that's what a funding request is. But now let's talk about what the roles are and the different roles people play. So one of the most important roles is your role. You are the applicant. In this case, the applicant is just school or school district or library that is applying. And now, even though the applicant is important, there is someone important within that applicant, within that entity, that is the account administrator. This is for Epic. In Epic, the account administrator is the person who is able to make the big changes. They're able to add consultants. They're able to assign rights. They're able to make changes to the entity profile. They can do all these things, and they're the only ones that can. As a consultant, I'm reliant on the account administrator to, when that library joins me or when that library works with us, they have to go into the system. They have to add our consulting firm. They have to go and add myself and any other consultants here as eligible users. And then they have to assign what kind of rights we have. We have partial rights when we review things. We have full rights where we can apply, where we can actually fill out all the forms for you, things like that. So the account administrator is someone who's very important. There's also the general contact, who is another person who receives all the items from USAC when there's outreach, whether it's from a reviewer or whether it is from someone else at USAC. The general contact is the person who receives that information. Then there's the consultant, people like me. Hi, we're a third party, and we do a lot of work on behalf of the applicant. We file forms, we answer questions that USAC has, only bothering if we have to. We track deadlines to make sure you don't miss anything, to make sure that all of your funding is in safe hands at all times. And lastly, there's the state E-rate coordinator, who, for your purposes, is the State Library of Kansas. They are someone who works on behalf of the state, and they can provide information regarding entities and eligibility. This is the value of a state E-rate coordinator is they have a database of every library in the state, at least that they recognize. So if for whatever reason USAC has a question about the library's eligibility in the state, we can reach out to the State Library of Kansas and say, hey, can you please confirm that we are an eligible library in the state? Or do you have record of our square footage based on the information? Although very likely you know your square footage and you probably have blueprints that show it. The state E-rate coordinator is someone who their word is good enough to make changes to an E-rate application. If the state E-rate coordinator says it's true, it's true. So in this case, for your purposes, it is the state library. So I was told that around 95% of libraries in the state of Kansas have consultants. I'm a consultant. I like consultants. Not everyone has one. So I just want to quickly go over the perks of having a consultant, me or someone else. And we'll also talk a little bit about possible downsides. So consultants are able to file pretty much all of the forms for you during every stage of the process. They will take care of the 470, the 471. There's a form called a 486, which just confirms you're ready to start service. They'll take care of issues that come up, and they'll respond to all these things, take care of all the forms for the most part. The only one we can't file is a form updating your bank information. That's a form 498. Not important right now, but we cannot update your bank information for you. Well, sometimes we can't certify it. Only you can certify it. We also manage deadlines for all those submissions, as well as applications and invoicing. There are deadlines for when you can get the money actually back. If you wait too long, you will just not get funding for the stuff you requested that year if you wait too long to invoice it. So we manage all those deadlines to make sure that you get everything you need. We also respond to inquiries from USAC's Program Integrity Insurance Department, also known as PIA. PIA asks questions throughout the year, and it is the job of the consultant to answer those questions as best they can, and they will reach out to you if they need information that they don't have available. Consultants also obtain reimbursement for all the funding, like I said, invoicing, whether that is filing the bear form and getting the money directly deposited into the library's bank account, or contacting the vendor and making sure they give you that credit. We also work with libraries, like we do now, so they can better understand and utilize the program. So in terms of downsides, I mean, personally, of course, I would say none, but these are things you might want to consider if you are thinking about a consultant. Since you are not doing as much, you might feel a bit less directly involved in the process. And if you're someone who really likes that control, you might want to be a little more involved, and maybe that involves doing the E-rate yourself. E-rate consultants do not work for free, except under very rare circumstances, if they're hired by the government, and even then they're not working for free, they're just getting paid by the government. So you do have to pay consulting fees. Those really vary wildly. Every consultant has different fee structure. Most consultants are excellent. The consultant community is not huge. There's a good number of us, but it's smaller than you think. And Most consultants I know are really hardworking, really intelligent, but keep in mind they are juggling a lot of different clients. So, are you going to be a priority with them? Probably, but maybe not as big as a larger client, just because there's only so much time in the day. And like I said, while most consultants are excellent, there are a few who I will not name who maybe are not quite as reputable. So just make sure that you're picking someone who has a good reputation and has a good history with clients. Now we're getting to the end, toward the end here. I just want to let you know, when you fill out a form and you fill out a whole bunch of certifications, I just want you to know what you are certifying, what you're saying yes to, when you click on all those certifications on the application. So you're saying that you are eligible and you do not have an endowment of over $50 million, which I imagine for most of you is the case. When you have access to all these resources, you need to purchase these items, so you have the money to buy those things in the first place, before you get reimbursed. And you're complying with all the local guidelines, the state guidelines, and that the items you are purchasing are primarily for educational purposes. You're not going to sell them. You can't buy a router and then sell it the next year for profit. It's like, oh, well, we need this discount. We got this discounted router. Now we're going to sell it full price. Can't do that. You're getting these items because you want to enhance the internet in your library. Also, are you certified that you've received nothing of value from a vendor or consultant, in connection with that request? Bribery is bad. Don't be involved in bribery. Don't do that. That you want to make sure you comply with our program rules, and also that you're keeping all your documentation for at least 10 years. So if they ask you to start digging back into some of your records, you have it ready to go. You also want to certify that you're authorized to order these telecommunications and services on the application, and that that you're telling the truth. That everything is true to the best of your knowledge. You're not taking kickbacks. You're not making kickbacks. You're compliant with all the rules and regulations, and that you're not requesting anything ineligible on purpose. If someone's ineligible, you've cost allocated, whether that is filtering on something or part of the firewall or like a network card which is not eligible, that you have not requested funds for things that are not allowed to have funding. If there's anything else you should know, it's that USAC sometimes has questions. Like I said, PIA, Program Integrity Assurance. They will contact you with a variety of form letters, and this is totally normal. This happens all the time. Doesn't mean you're in trouble. All you have to do is make sure you respond as promptly as completely as possible. If you have a consultant, they will help you out with that, just as I help my clients all the time. But you will get inquiries sometimes. You will get these questions about a variety of different things. And there's answers to almost all these things as long as you follow the rules. So that is the end of my presentation. I do have some helpful links here, like the link to USAC and to Epic, as well as the hotline to reach us if you have any questions for us, as well as my email address, plus my office number and my cell. I'm very reachable on my cell most of the time. And something you should know before we open up to questions is that we were hired by the State Library of Kansas to work in an advisory role. We are helping them out, and we are helping out every library in Kansas that needs it. We cannot file forms for you as part of this agreement, but everything else in terms of answering questions and providing guidance, we are happy to do all. So please feel free to reach out to us anytime through any of the methods noted here. If you don't talk to me, you can talk to my colleague, Maris Medina, or my colleague, Norman White, who also are involved as client relations associates. I'm the lead consultant, but we have a lot of really knowledgeable people here who know a ton about the program and really enjoy helping. So please, if you have any questions, you can email us, call us. We're there for you. But in the meantime, we have about 10 minutes, it looks like. And so I think we can open the floor to questions. If you do have any questions, just you can put it in the chat or you can raise your hand and we'll get to it. If you don't
Thank you,
have
Ivory.
questions,
That was a lot of information.
I know.
I have, with our initial uh, invite to this webinar, we did send out your contact information. I will go ahead and make sure that that is sent out again. just so that everyone has that available. And then the video will be posted on the website on our E-rate webpage, and I'll send that out to everybody as well.
Great. Yeah, it is a lot. And we actually tried to narrow it down to a lot of things. There's a
Yeah,
lot more that is involved in E-rate, but we don't want to overwhelm you. And I hope that we were able to express all this information in a way that made it a little more digestible because there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of lingo, a lot of
yeah.
terms that are really only for E-rate. And so I know it can really feel overwhelming, especially if you are foreign to this. So, or this is foreign to you. So yeah, we're here in case you need anything.
Okay. Well, um, everyone has my email. We've sent out Ivan's contact info, and I will do that again for those who registered. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me or to Ivan. And if no one has any questions, we will call it a day. Going once, going
Well,
twice.
everyone, thank you. Yeah. uh,
Sold.